strategic partnerships and development here at Mer Ranch Group. For those of you who are first joining, the Land Bulletin is a special podcast and live stream where every other week we discuss the ranch and sporting property market, buying and selling advice, the latest best stewardship practices, as well as topics currently impacting landowners. Mer Ranch Group is a full-service ranch real estate brokerage and consulting company focusing on legacy ranches and sporting and conservation properties around the West. Today, we have a special guest on, and I'm really excited to learn more because this is something that has been around for a while, but is gaining more and more in traction as the years go on. But today we're going to be focusing on what makes a ranch an ideal candidate for conservation investment. We throw this term around a lot. We talk about easements, but this is something entirely different. It's about more like banking and those kinds of things. So thank you to everyone who has submitted a question. We'll try to get to them on this broadcast, but if we don't reach you then, we will follow up after this. So today, my guest helping me out learning more about conservation investment is our dear friend, Ben Guillon. Welcome, Ben.
Hi, Haley. How you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for coming on the podcast today. It was great to see you at the Citizen of the West the other night.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, that's always a good dinner.
Always a good dinner. And before we get started and going into everything that you know about conservation banking and all these different type of investment practices, I'd love to know and have kind of the viewers know what your background is. What brought you to this field and this expertise?
Yeah, I was raised in a small town in Normandy, as you can tell. Not exactly from the Western slopes, but so I was raised in Normandy in the middle of dairy cows. So very naturally, I went to vet school to be a livestock and wildlife vet. Went to Africa and then really worked on that intersection between animal husbandry, wildlife, and economic development. Especially, I love land and conservation, and there's absolutely no way, especially in Africa, you can ethically do conservation without, helping with the economic development. So it took me to DC to work with the World Bank. That's where I met my wife, and she's from Craig, so like really
Normandy to Craig.
Yeah, how Frenchmen will end up in Craig, Colorado. She was raised on a sheep and cattle ranch, and so we hit it off. Just the same love of land, of big spaces of animals, and I continue working on that connection between economic development and land management and conservation in the U.S., which led me very quickly to conservation investments and ranch brokerage, because that's an integral part of the business.
And it's becoming more and more. I mean, they used to be not synonymous, but I think more and more people are looking at creative ways of investment, and this is definitely an avenue a lot of people can take. So we're grateful to have you on the team because a lot of us know a lot about hunting and fishing and conservation easements, but like Ben is our in-house conservation investment expert. So for those of you watching, if you do own a ranch and you do have questions about it, this is your guy. So we'll kind of go into, not to like blow too much smoke up your chimney, but you're one of the best. So perfect. But before we get into it, I guess, of the successes and the things that you've seen in the market space, I think those who are tuning in today would love to know, okay, I own this piece of land. I really would love to see if mitigation banking is something that we should consider, but maybe it's not a good candidate. So in your opinion, what makes a good conservation investment? What type of ranch would be a good candidate for those?
Absolutely. And that's where I think that what's important is to take really a step back, where a lot of consultants may try to sell you immediately on a $20,000 study or something like that. And that's just some very basic tests that you can run to see if it's even worth your time. And the reality is, if you have the right ranch, you may be sitting on a gold mine, but just like gold mines, there are not that many around. So let's be honest, most ranches are not appropriate for conservation investment. So really the two large markets that exist in the US and specifically also in Colorado are around wetlands and then protected species.
Okay.
Those are really the two. So if you have wetlands on your property, you can start thinking about it. If you've got a protected species, same thing. You can start thinking about it. So protected species, mainly right now the market is the Preble's middle jumping mouse, which is a little mouse that lives in the streams around the Front Range. But I really think we're going to see an interesting market develop with the lesser prairie chicken
Okay.
in the plains. And then the greater sage grouse is going to be also an opportunity for ranchers um, in the mountains and around Craig.
Yeah.
So that's kind of your first step. Do I eat something that can be turned into credits? Then your second step is, am I in an area where there is a market?
Right.
If you have lesser prairie chicken, you probably have a market just because the development that we're forecasting for the wind industry is absolutely gigantic. And so all that area is a potential market. If you've got Prebbles, same thing, you're probably along the Front Range, and then you really see
Development.
that
Yeah.
development. Sort of during your lifetime, you've probably seen a lot of changes there.
Hmm.
Greater sage grouse for right now is a more distant market. It hasn't materialized yet. If you take wetlands, you need to be in a watershed where people will have a need for your credits. So if you're anywhere along the Front Range, if you're close to a large ski resort, if you're close to Durango, you that that is probably an opportunity. Sorry
Okay.
to say that if you're in an area that I like Sterling, um, probably not the best area to have a bank because there's not really a strong market there. So you may be sitting on your investment for 10, 20, 30 years,
Right.
which is not really successful. You probably want to use your land for something else than waiting 30 years to be paid.
And it's interesting you say that because in the news we keep seeing like the greater sage grouse, the state of greater sage grouse, and I've even talked to ranchers who have flung around the idea of having like banks because of this news that has come out. But it's interesting to hear your perspective that that's maybe further along in the future because maybe there's just not a market for it.
It is in Colorado.
Yeah.
We're talking about Wyoming. Wyoming has a state system for the greater sage grouse. It is
Okay.
still trying to figure out how it works. Nevada has also its own system. So
Okay.
on a state-specific basis, there may be some opportunities, but even then, it remains a maybe. Was if you've got Preble's middle jumping mouse on your property, um, it is great news.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, it is
Yeah.
actually great news.
Okay. So that's super interesting just to know kind of what's out there and, well, not only like is my property ready for this type of investment, but then is there a market for that? I feel like there's two stages to that, to your point.
Exactly, and
Okay.
you can do it on your own. That's information that's you
Mhm.
know widely available. You can call your NRCS person to ask, what type of wetlands you have, what type of habitat you have. You just don't need a consultant for that. And your NRCS office is going to be able to give you that answer, and then you can see for yourself whether or not you're close to anything that being developed or not.
Okay. And that's where they come and they can talk to you.
Exactly. And then we're always happy if you have a doubt, just always come to us before you
Mhm.
sign up with a consultant for a big contract. In most cases, look at maps with you and give you a sense of what you have within 20
Mhm.
minutes. I mean, it, yeah, we've been doing that for 20 years. So
Yeah, you know what you're doing. And another question I just had, and I'm sure other people watching probably have, is, we've talked a lot about conservation easements on this podcast, but we haven't really touched on this sense of conservation investment. Are they synonymous? Can you do them together, or is there some things you have to know before considering both?
yeah, so you can absolutely. So every mitigation bank has, or I would say 99% of the conservation bank and the mitigation banks have a conservation easement. And so, in that sense, they're very similar to what you would expect with a conservation easement. Um, the benefit of the bank is that it comes with an endowment that will pay for your long-term costs with replacing fences and all of that. So those two are very similar. In
Okay.
general, it is very difficult to do a bank on top of an easement that has already been donated to the IRS or for which you have gotten money from the state or tax credits. That creates a lot of entanglements. It is not impossible, but it makes life a lot more difficult, and you will make a lot less money out of the bank. So we always, when in doubt, before you put a conservation easement on your property, you should give us a call so that we can
Mhm.
tell you if you're about to you know to take a wrong turn, because you could still do a conservation easement with a bank, but basically make potentially a lot more money through a bank rather than through a traditional conservation easement. And we can still use the same land trust. So again, you don't
Right.
have to burn that bridge with your land trust, but it's just a different way of doing it.
Okay, that's good to know. And I know there's some helpful articles and things that people can read that are out there. Is there anything in particular that, let's say, I'm interested in doing this? I'm not necessarily there and talking to Ben and Mer Ranch Group about, is my property ready? Are there any things that you recommend people reading or checking out to?
Yeah, I mean the Western Landowner Alliance is a great resource, and they actually approached us back 3-4 years ago with that concern that there were landowners really asking questions and not necessarily getting the right answers. And so we did a series of blog posts with some series of very simple questions, between 3 and 5 questions that you can answer for each type of conservation investments, and that's also for carbon and conservation easements, and just to see whether or not it is something that you should put more thought into, potentially
Mhm.
hire a consultant. At some point, you will need a consultant, but you may want to, do that due diligence up front. And so the Western Landowner Alliance has a lot of those resources, and you can find that on the website.
Okay, great. And that's a process that the landowner can kind of go through. So then once they speak to you and you figure out, okay, maybe this is a good opportunity, what's your process after getting introduced to the land? Whether it be, testing it to make sure that it is viable for something like this, to just closing, because I know you've dealt with some of that
Yeah.
recently.
And it is a process, but it can be really split in pretty distinct phases. The first one will indeed be doing our own due diligence, which includes title. We just want to make sure there is nothing on the title, and it includes water rights. If you're doing wetlands, we need to make sure nobody can kill your wetlands by just shutting down the water upstream.
Right.
So title, mineral, water. So that takes care of the paperwork, and then boots on the ground.
Hmm.
GIS, like the map system is great, but there is nothing like putting boots on the ground, taking a shovel, digging a
Hmm.
hole, and just seeing what type of soils you have, what type of plants you have, what type of animals you have. So at this point, we have a picture of whether or not the property works. Will probably dig a little bit more into the market to
Hmm.
understand, really who's paying what, are the potential competitors already further along. Once we reach that point, we can, if the landowner is still interested, work with the agencies to make sure that on the agency side, they're also on board with
Hmm.
us doing the project. There is no point on if you have one of those meetings and you feel the people on the other side are not particularly interested in your project, really think twice. Um, Working against the agencies is a good way to have a very long, process and painful process. So that's
Okay.
why we try to get the temperature, prepare what we call a draft prospectus that explains, okay, here's what we want to do, and get that green light. At
Okay.
this point, as the landowner, you can decide, what do you want to do? Do you want to sell the land? Do you want to keep the land? Do you want to have a financial partner to shoulder the cost of doing the project? So usually that's when we have that strategic meeting then of, okay, how are we going to move forward? Because some of those projects can really be expensive. If
I'm
you're
sure.
doing extensive wetland and stream restoration, you may end up with several $1 million of cost, and so you may want to partner with a real estate group or one of our clients to make that project happen. Once you've got the financing, whichever way you decide to do it, then there is a process that is very shares a lot of similarities with doing a subdivision. With
Okay.
you've got to go to all those agencies at the state level, at the federal level, get all the permits, and that can take, just like with residential development or any type of development, can be as quick as a couple of years, or just like recent bank for the Prebbles Meadow jumping mouse took us 8 years to get it done. It's just
That's some
it is a
patience.
bit of a black box, yeah.
Yeah.
But then it's worth it. Then you have credits that
Mhm.
make your land extremely valuable. I mean,
Yeah.
that's
It's worth
we're
it.
talking about bringing ag land value to something that is sometimes worth 10 times uh,
Hmm.
what it was worth as ag land. And then you can sell those credits to anybody who needs a permit, because they will be impacting the resource that you are protecting. So with our bank in Larimer County, we're protecting the riparian area of a stream for the Prebbles Meadow jumping mouse. There's a large reservoir that's being built like 10 miles down the road that will inundate entirely the habitat for the mouse that will be under the footprint of the dam.
Sure.
And
Wow.
so they have to provide mitigation for that impact. They can't get a permit without that. And so
Wow.
they wanted, they really wanted all credits, because now they know it's pre-approved. They just don't have to go through another approval. They don't have to go through another project, other construction, all of that. They literally sign on the dotted line, get their credits, and then all the headaches go away. And that's
Hmm.
the reason why people are so excited to be buying credit, because they don't have to go through the 8 years of pulling your hair off that we went through. It's
Yeah.
literally
It's right there now.
transaction that can be done within 24 hours
Hmm.
instead of 8 years. So that's why we can really increase the value of the land through that process.
Well, if you think about it from a perspective of investing in like mutual funds or bonds or things like that, I mean, that takes even longer than 8 years for it to make financial sense, So,
Absolutely. No, I
so it
mean
makes sense
the
to me.
returns can be very, can be on par
Hmm.
with high risk financial investment like private equity and things that you may not even have access to
Right.
in real life. And honestly, often people will come to us with land that it is stranded, where you found the pebbles on your property. You think, well, I can't do anything anymore with that piece of land. The value is zero, and guess what? We can actually monetize
Hmm.
that piece of land. Or if you have wetlands, what can you do? You can't really, build your house there. Can't really put a road through it. You think that it's kind of wasted acreage, but we can actually turn that into an asset. So that's really the really interesting part of the job, is for people to suddenly realize that part of the ranch they thought was just worthless, is
Makes
actually,
more.
that's what's the most valuable part per acre,
Yeah,
on the ranch.
that's super. I mean, that's such an awesome way to think about it. And so, I mean, you've been talking about this most recent um, project that you've been working on. I'd love to know more about, the award that you just recently were awarded. Not to use the
Yeah.
same word twice, but congratulations! The state land board presented you with this at the beginning of this year, end of last year.
End of
Uh,
end of last year. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
So can you tell me a little bit about that and what kind of that that award included? Because it's
Yeah.
incredible what you've done over the past 8 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Lacey of the Year award that is awarded to a Lacey, and until now it's only been to producers, meaning really, cattle ranchers and farmers, because the idea is that it needs to be a steward of the land that has proven, demonstrated another level of stewardship and made money, for the landlord, and so
Mhm.
we were recognized because first 2 years of our process was spent convincing them that actually it was not a scam, that we knew what we were doing, and that they would make a significant amount of money, out of the mitigation. And we created, what is called an ecosystem services lease, which is basically we just took an oil and gas lease and changed it just to say, well, instead of pumping oil and gas, what we'll do is create credits, out of the riparian area, and you will get a royalty on the on those credits. So then it took us
Okay.
6 years to get everything approved, a new type of conservation easement also for the state land board. And, last year we gave them a check that is the equivalent of 1,000 years of the agricultural lease that they
Wow.
were getting for that piece of property. And by the way, they can still, it's not off limit for grazing. So that grazing fee is still coming in, and it's, the property can still be grazed once it's restored.
In a bit. Okay.
So they were pretty amazed, about what we can do, with those tools.
Well, I just love this. I know it's only been like 20 minutes, but I feel like there's so many different misnomers that have been floating that you've been able to squash. So it's really interesting to know all the things that are available to landowners like this, and that the profit that can occur for, these cattle ranchers, these people that are trying to continue to own the land, but like, what are the tools out there? Because you said it the other day, but what's really neat about this type of stewardship is, you're working with these landowners sometimes from the beginning of owning a piece of land to the end. Like, you're there for the life cycle of the ranch, not just the purchasing and the selling of it. You're there to help them figure out how to own it and how to be profitable from it, which is really neat.
Yeah, a lot of our clients, I mean, all of our clients, it's usually a multi-year, relationship. And
Hmm.
some of them, as you say, we helped them buy. Some of them wanted to sell, and that's why they approached us. And then suddenly, when we ran the numbers, they were like, "Well, wait a minute, I'm not sure I want to sell anymore." And in some cases, I mean, there's a client. It's been almost 10 years now, that we've been developing that bank for the family. It's selling the credits on their behalf, and it's been like a success, both from a conservation and financial success too. I mean, they like that project. I can tell you
Yeah,
that.
that's always nice. A little financial success at the end. That you get mad at that.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess moving, like, looking forward, I mean, it seems like more and more so, you kind of alluded to it earlier in our conversation, that this is going to become more of a viable tool, and maybe some other different markets might be popping up. So where do you see the kind of the future of conservation investment for landowners?
Right now, I'm feeling extremely bullish on the lesser prairie chicken. So if
Okay.
you have lesser prairie chicken on your ranch, please give us a call, because there was a very recently it was listed by the Fish and Wildlife Service. So when you saw that, you may have a heart attack. You may have had a heart attack, because
Right.
that means the feds are coming onto your land. And I'm sorry, that's the case.
Mhm.
But if you've got chicken on your land, you may have hit the jackpot on that one. So give us a
Mhm.
call, because right now that's probably the hottest market. Then, really, if you have anything along the front range, that
Mhm.
has any type of water on it, wetlands, stream, even if they've been just plowed under or ditched, we can bring them back. But that is, in Colorado, another very strong markets.
Mhm.
Um, and then in Wyoming, the greater sage grouse is really the driver, more than wetlands or anything like that. Unless you're Probably if you're close to Jackson Hole,
Yeah.
you'll find some people willing to pay quite a lot of money. But that
Yeah.
may be just the spec in the entire state. Was the greater sage grouse is tied to oil and gas development and mining. So that's those are good
Huge up there.
industries that
Mhm.
are always looking for um,
Yeah.
ways to expand.
And I love what you said a little bit ago about, if you see these animals on your property, like, don't have a heart attack. This isn't the end for you, even though there's a lot of news out there that says it might be, because to your point, and the success that you had with the mouse up in Larimer County, like, there's an opportunity here that I think people need to realize. And it's neat. We focus on a lot of different types of investment strategies with properties and income producing, avenues. So it's just really neat to see something like this where you're protecting something too while making money. It's really incredible.
Exactly, and you know not only because I'm married into a ranching family and I want to be invited again for Thanksgiving, but also because that's true. It's just that cattle is one of the best tool, and sheep the same way.
Mhm.
Those are fantastic tools for land management. And so what I love is that we're making projects that allow those families to keep their ranch and really help keep that Western way of life, the ranching way
Mhm.
of life. You just don't have to lose that. It's not off limits. Um, all our properties are grazed or will be grazed when they're restored, and that's a key part. It's actually a requirement of the conservation easement. We cannot stop grazing. If we were to stop grazing, would be in breach of our agreements. We
Really?
are obligated to graze, which is great,
Yeah.
but it guarantees that those lands will remain in ag and conservation in
Yeah.
perpetuity.
So like Ken said, keeping working lands working. That's what
That is
this
exactly
does.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, this has been awesome, Ben. And I've learned so much. And I'm sure everyone watching has learned a lot too. So if any of you watching have a piece of land that you're considering, or your neighbors have done something, or you just have questions, feel free to reach out to Mer Ranch Group and Ben directly. He can be reached at ben@merranchgroup.com. But Ben, again, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm sure we might have you on again, because I feel like we just scratched the surface of what's possible.
Always happy to share what we're doing and what we know. That's the part
Awesome.
to share.
Well, hopefully I see you at the office or down at the stock show this week.
Exactly. Probably at the stock show soon at a rodeo.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thanks, Ben.
Bye,
See ya.
Ellie. See you.
And for those of you watching, if you have questions about conservation investment or any other strategies that maybe you can implement on your own ranch, please feel free to give us a call at 303-623-4545 or reach us on our website at www.merranchgroup.com. And as always, thanks again for watching. See you next time.